Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music, and doing this video is going to be a special treat for me. It's about the band called Tomorrow, and a hat tip out there to a regular subscriber who's actually engaged on my channel, which I really appreciate. Um, Protection Racket, and he brought up the fact when I did the Bodas video about how much he loved the album by Tomorrow, and I'm right there with you, buddy. The Tomorrow record is fantastic. And it's still hard for me to believe that it commercially flopped. One of the great early psychedelic records out of the UK, along with Pink Floyd and Soft Machine. They were definitely at the head of the pack, and a particular favorite of mine because it has Steve Howe's excellent guitar work all over it, pre-Bodast and pre-Yes. And so the band existed from roughly 1965 to 1968. They were originally called the In Crowd, and they were also known as 4 Plus One. And then they recorded their album in 1967. And the band was Keith West on vocals, Steve Howe on guitar, Junior Wood on bass, and John Alder, better known as Twink, on drums. And Twink, of course, went on to play with the Pretty Things and the Pink Fairies. So he's a legend all in his own. Has a vast catalog of work actually with kind of solo work and then all these bands he's been involved with. But the album, although it was recorded in 1967, came out in February 1968. Has an amazing cover, and they were signed to Parlophone, so it was a big deal when they got signed and put out this record. And I also have a hard time believing that they were that unsuccessful because there's some live material, and it sounds like the crowd is very responsive. So not sure what went wrong. They had a reasonably decent hit with My White Bicycle, which later got turned into a hit by Nazareth, but the original psychedelic version by Tomorrow was just outstanding. And then we have Mark Wirtz, who did the production. He did a fantastic job, and he did the musical direction, so he's responsible for a lot of the interesting sound effects and keyboards and everything on it, because he also played keyboards. And he has quite a profile, too, and I might be doing a video just on him. Very interesting character. But the Tomorrow record is just stunning. It really has everything you'd want from an early psychedelic record. It's got one foot in the 60s and then one foot looking forward, which of course I really like. And a lot of the reason why it looks forward, of course, is the advanced guitar work of Steve Howe, which is featured all over this record, and it's all over the Bodast record as well. So if you like Tomorrow, definitely check out my video on Bodast. But when you go through the album, it's got everything you'd want. My White Bicycle has lots of interesting backwards effects and has whispered vocals and a lot of hallmarks of great psychedelic music. And then it goes into tunes like Colonel Brown, Real Life Permanent Dream, which has sitar in it, which is definitely a psych move of the times. Now Your Time Has Come, great rock tune with a really nice guitar construction towards the end with lots of cool guitar overdubs. Then goes into Revolution, which was actually their second single. Really twisted, really interesting arrangement, a lot of phasing. It's got some flute and strings in it, and is just really truly psychedelic. And I think a lot of people seem to misuse the word psychedelic out there to go into music into the 70s as well. Psychedelic music is really pretty much 66, 67 into 68, and some bands were still using psychedelic elements in 1969, but after that, psychedelia was done, so to call any 70s band psychedelic is very misleading. So then we get into the incredible journey of Timothy Case, which has a really great arrangement, really cool chord progressions. Auntie Mary's Dress Shop with a harpsichord and piano, very nice pop psych tune. And that's the other thing. A lot of the songs on this record are really strong. You get some Canterbury kind of sounds. You get the Carnaby Street sounds. You get the psychedelic elements, and then you get sitars and harpsichords and things like that that were really popular with psychedelic bands. But this band uses them really well. And one of the wildest inclusions on this album, of course, is a version of the Beatles' "Strawberry Fields Forever," which has just excellent drums and is turned into kind of a heavy guitar song. And so they really put their own take on "Strawberry Fields Forever," and very bold move by them. Of course, they recorded it in the year that it came out, and for them to have the audacity to do a Beatles song, let alone one this well known, uh, took a lot of chutzpah. And on the live material, they do "Strawberry Fields Forever," and it's a real stunner. So they really make it kind of pack a wallop, while it still has the psychedelic qualities. Then you get into Three Jolly Little Dwarfs, which is a great rock song, Shy Boy, which is another nice psychedelic pop song, and then they finish up with Hallucination, which is another killer pop rock song. And so that's one of the hallmarks of a band from this era. You're going to have some pop elements and some memorable melodies, but then you're going to have some really wacky guitar work and then a lot of interesting effects and interesting instrumentation and a lot of daring arrangements. And this album definitely epitomizes that. Jeff Emmerich, a very famous producer, produced the record, so excellent production, top of the line. And turns out they were uh, possibly going to do a couple of songs, part of the soundtrack for Blow Up, and of course they ended up hooking up with the Yardbirds, who appear in the movie Blow Up. But there's two songs that they recorded for the Blow Up film that weren't used. Fortunately, there's a compilation CD that has those and also has some BBC and some live material, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So they had the two singles, both came out in 1967, My White Bicycle and Revolution. And then there was a long delay to the album, so that might have had something to do with why the album flopped, because the singles came out considerably earlier than the album did, and that lag might have been part of the problem. But they also were uh, top of the line enough that Jimi Hendrix actually jammed with Tomorrow at the UFO Club, and I would love to have heard Steve Howe and Hendrix together. Steve Howe obviously probably could have kept up with Hendrix reasonably well, but it'd be awesome if there was a recording of that. I'd love to hear that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they started out as the In Crowd, and they actually recorded three singles that came out in Parlophone in 1965. But they're definitely more garage beat sort of pop singles in a way. But so this band actually has some history to it, and then their sound evolved to the point where they were one of the first psychedelic bands. And one of the things I found interesting digging around is finding out that there was actually Keith West was a known quantity, so they started marketing them as Keith West and Tomorrow because he had a hit with a pop song previous to Tomorrow coming out. And so when the record started um, languishing a little bit, they started playing up the fact that it was Keith West and Tomorrow. But I still see it as a full band, of which Keith West was a member, but that's the way it works in rock music. But really cool that there was a second version of Tomorrow, and a couple singles were put out. Certainly, at least one single, but it was put under the moniker of Keith West. They weren't put out under the Tomorrow moniker, and they included a new lineup of Tomorrow, which was Keith West and Steve Howe, but with Ronnie Wood on bass and Ansley Dunbar on drums. What a lineup! And fortunately, we have an expanded version of the Tomorrow album on CD now that includes all these extra bonus tracks that are considered part of the Tomorrow legacy. But single came out under Keith West's name called On a Saturday, with The Kid Was a Killer on the B side, and that features the second lineup of Tomorrow, or what ostensibly might have been a new band. And of course, Keith West would move on to do solo work again, and Steve Howe would go to Bodast, and then to Yes. And so what a nice lineage. But boy, it's too bad there isn't an entire second Tomorrow album with the Keith West, Steve Howe, Ronnie Wood, Ainsley Dunbar lineup. The single's pretty killer, not quite as psychedelic as the Tomorrow album, but definitely worthy, and they're great pieces to have now tied together with the Tomorrow album. So then we get to um, a record that's been released in a couple different forms. It originally came out called the 50-minute Technicolor Dream, and has the two unused Blow Up soundtrack songs, Am I Glad to See You and Blow Up. Then there's three BBC tracks, and then there's a live set. And wow, the live set is super powerful. The band sounds great. They're obviously rehearsed. They managed to pull off this material really well, even without all the psychedelic effects. And it's got songs that aren't on the album. So the live set has Caught in a Web, Shotgun in the Duck, My White Bicycle, Real Life Permanent Dream, the heavy psychedelic tune Revolution, which works great live even without all the effects on it. And then a song called Why, and then a song called Mr. Rainbow. And then they finish up with Strawberry Fields Forever, and they just do a killer version of it. And that's quite a feat in itself, especially, as I mentioned, putting it out in the same year that the Beatles put it out, and then recording it and doing this reinterpretation and making it more of a powerful rock song with great guitar work. And just like the Bodast album, Steve Howe's guitar work obviously is all over this record. Not quite as much as on the Bodast record, but that said, there's just stellar. He has such interesting phrasing, and his runs are so unexpected and so interesting. And they certainly got that way more as you move through Steve Howe's career. By the time he got to Yes, he had such an idiosyncratic style that it really is one of a kind. But he already had those qualities when he was in Tomorrow and Bodast, and I'm with Protection Racket. Tomorrow is not only one of my favorite psychedelic rock albums of all time. It's definitely up there in my top rock albums of all time. It's really one of a kind, probably one of the most perfect psychedelic albums outside of a Beatles record or the first Pink Floyd album, and just incredible record on every level. Keith West is a fine singer. The rhythm section is really strong, really holds up with all the interesting arrangements that are going on, and then Steve Howe's guitar work just brings it all together. And then Mark Wirtz did a great job with keyboards and extra instrumentation and orchestration, and then all these psychedelic effects. And the psychedelic effects are really cool on this record too, because they're not too heavy-handed. I think of a record like Arzical, and the psychedelic effects are really just saturate that album. But this record, they really just augment what is just a great rock band. Pop in the sense that the melodies are really strong, and they actually have a good singer, and then just an all-time great rock band. So as always, I'll put the links to both records below. Definitely check out the live stuff, particularly if you really like the studio stuff. But if you don't like this record, I don't know what to tell you. And again, a hat tip to Protection Racket for reminding me of this album. I've done over 300 some odd bands now on this channel, and I kind of didn't get around to Tomorrow because sometimes I just feel like they're really well known, and that it was a band that I would probably have gotten to, but I just kind of put them on the back burner because I kind of try and stay away from bands that are really well known. I'm trying to get to obscure stuff that a lot of collectors these days may not have heard of, or if they've heard of, maybe they're not sure what they're all about. And as always, I try to focus in on stuff that's not just collectible, but stuff that's really great and stuff that's really listenable in all different styles of 60s and 70s. And so anyway, I've rectified that situation. I now kind of realize that really Tomorrow is not necessarily that well known, and anything I can do to help spread the word about this great band, this great record is well worth it. So tomorrow. Check it out. Get it right now. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.